Well, welcome everyone to the Office of Field Education webinar. We're recording today so that in case you don't get all of the information the first time around, you can certainly listen to it again, and we also have turned on the captions. We're excited to share with you a little bit about the field education process to get you started to think about it. And we just want you to know that the students that should be listening today are students who are planning to begin field in fall of 2023. Students starting in the online program will have a special webinar during your first term in the program, since your field application timeline is somewhat different. So let's go ahead and see some faces. Today we have quite a few of the field team members with us today, and we wanted to just show you who they are so that you know. My name is Dr. Rachel Nosko, and I'm the Interim Director of Field Education here at the School of Social Work. I'd also like to introduce you to some of our Office of Field Education team who will be answering your questions and be here to support you along the journey that you will have while you're here at the school and also in your field placement. You'll also be hearing from Professor Stacy Peterson and Professor Amy Vantine, who will talk with you in more detail about the field application and placement process. Additionally, Stacy and Clinical Associate Professor Beth Sherman will be here to share with you during the final portion of our session to talk about school social work certification specifically, since it has a few important requirements. Here are other friends here that are joining us today. We've now expanded and moved on to 2 slides, and also we are having a new field faculty member join us on Monday. So that's why we don't have her picture yet, because we will add it when she arrives. Okay, we are going to break before the session on school social work practice at the end, and so that will be the time when we will respond to your questions. We know that you have lots of questions, and there will be ways to get those answered, but we really want you to be able to pay attention to the information that we've put together, because we're quite certain we've got most of the questions that might come naturally to you already answered in the content we'll be presenting today. If not, there'll be time to ask those questions, and of course, even after today, if you have questions, you can always call or email our office. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about learning acquisition. And there's a reason that we talk about this, because if you're not familiar with the field of social work, or even if you are familiar with the field of social work, understanding why you're doing something or why the profession that you're entering is doing something is pretty important to know. So why does social work believe that field education is so important? Why is it actually 25% of your curriculum and your time here? Well, it's because we think that there are, and actually we know that there are different ways to develop the skills that you're going to need to be successful. In fact, studies show that 10% of your development only occurs during formal training like classing or e-learning or books. But another 20% comes back through feedback and observing and working with mentors and coaches and leaders and teachers. But 70% of your learning generally happens through on-the-job experiences, tasks, and problem solving. If this doesn't surprise you, it wouldn't surprise me either, because many people say, I'm a hands-on learner. I like to get involved in actually doing it as I'm learning it. And so that's really what field education offers you the opportunity to do. Next slide, please. So in graduate education, it's slightly different, right? You might need to make a shift in your thinking about grades and what you're trying to learn. Your focus in our program, and especially in field education, should be more on learning outcome, not learning performance. There's a difference. Your clients, nor your future employers, will care about your GPA. And in fact, I was just talking with our MSW program director, Barb Hiltz, and she said, I've never, ever looked at a potential applicant's transcript. So worry less about the grades and more about what you're learning and how you can practice to improve that. We fully anticipate that this shift to learning outcome may be a challenge, and it also kind of creates some discomfort when we're used to kind of understanding our what we've taken in by the grade mechanism. And yes, you'll have an assessment process too within field education, but it will be thinking more about how you're learning, how you're reflecting, and how you're practicing the social work competencies that you will be exposed to. Field education is about progressive, integrative, applied learning. This involves learning through supervision, learning through your mistakes and practice, and also seeking and using feedback to develop and enhance your skills and abilities. We want you to ask, how did that go? How could I do it better? That is really how you will get the most out of your field education experience. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what social work education is all about. Your field placement is the applied learning and experiential training part of your MSW program. Field education is the opportunity for you to take what you learn in the classroom and apply these concepts and theories to the real world environment. Sometimes you'll see that they fit very nicely and sometimes not so much. For your field education courses, you'll be placed in a field site that's based on your selected pathway, setting of interest, and learning goals. It's also important to know that field placements are in a variety of settings, primarily located within southeastern Michigan. The types of field sites include things like mental health agencies, community and social service agencies, hospitals, healthcare settings, K-12 settings, higher education settings, offices of elected officials, and many other settings where social work practice takes place, some of which you haven't even considered yet. We often also hear about or get questions about how is it different than a job? Well, this is a really important question. In fact, we get this question quite a bit. In many ways, sometimes it feels like a job. You're going to need to be on time. You're going to have to fulfill any requirements or commitments. They may have a dress code, and they'll ask you to use your professional behavior in the setting. You'll be responsible for communication and interacting respectively with the people at your site. And you'll also learn to deal with complicated interpersonal dynamics that take place in the work environment. If all of this is new to you, that's okay. We'll be here to support you along the way. Social work, like other professional schools, such as medicine or nursing, pharmacy, dentistry, education, all believe that it's critical for you to have the opportunity to learn and practice your skills in real world environments that you'll eventually work in. As a licensed professional, your field placement allows you as a student to practice as a pre-licensed MSW before you receive your degree and license in order to gain the skills that you'll need. Your educational agreement, which is an online document, think of it like the assignments of your course, will help you, and we'll teach you all about it, but it will help be the key learning tool that will guide and design your field learning experience. I think of MSW training as being similar to medical school in that you're going to take learning from the classroom and from your field experiences. Once you're going to graduate, you'll be a limited licensed social worker, and you'll be required to do more hours of supervision, up to 4,000 or more, before you can become a fully licensed social worker. In Michigan, we know this as the LLMSW, and in my opinion, it's very similar to medical residencies that doctors do after they complete medical school. So understand the skills and experiences that you need to become a fully licensed social worker. It takes about roughly 5,000 hours of supervised practice experience, almost 1,000 while you're in the program and another 4,000 after you graduate. And those numbers are specific to Michigan. In other states, they may vary. Although we're not allowed to give you field credit for previous work experiences, if you are employed in a job that you think would meet the social work competency learning goals of our profession, let us know and we can figure out if we can explore that you can do an employment-based field placement there. What's important to know is this must involve field instruction from a licensed master's social worker, learning supervision, and having clearly established educational goals that will help you develop the social work competencies. If you have more questions, please let us know. It's important to note that we also have a joint task force on stipends, which includes students to explore strategies for addressing the cost of higher education and student debt load. I bring this up because we know that field is a large time commitment. This necessary time commitment associated with field is complex, and it's a challenging issue for sure. But efforts around legislative efforts related to behavioral health workforce development, loan forgiveness, philanthropic opportunities to enhance stipends are the focus of the Joint Task Force. And there'll be ongoing updates as we go, as you're in the program, on how the Joint Task Force is doing with that work. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about why we've talked about why learning is important. We've talked about why practice integration is important. Let's also talk about why this is so important to our field. I'd like to say that social work is a profession where the subject matter is uniquely human, infinitely complex, and includes just about everything that makes life interesting. Interpersonal relationships, family dynamics, culture, community systems, and our society in general. It's messy, it's constantly unpredictable and inherently challenging, and also it's fascinating and remarkably rewarding. In choosing to become a social worker, you're committing yourself to the profession's core values of service, social justice, dignity and worth of a person, the importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence. I didn't make those up. Those are straight from the Social Work Code of Ethics that you'll become very familiar with. Social work also involves a commitment to integrative lifelong learning, frequent reflection, and critical thinking, and your ability to understand your use of self in engaging and helping others. All of your experiences in field, from practicing specific social work skills to establishing collaborative working relationships and navigating ethical dilemmas and challenging personal interactions, are important and valuable learning opportunities. Yet they may be very uncomfortable. We're here to support you through that. In both the classroom and in the field, you're beginning to develop your social work identity. And by that, I mean the way that you start to see these interactions and challenges and opportunities using your social work lens. You're also developing your professional brand. So taking this seriously from the moment you enter, take this seriously from the moment that you enter the program, because it really starts on day one. It's important for you to recognize that you are not the receivers of service or education, but you're actively participating and engaging in the education to prepare yourselves to become the provider of service to others. It's important to integrate and apply classroom education, life, work, and volunteer experiences to your role as a social worker. And this is the focus on preparation to be providers of service that distinguishes the MSW education. So what will you do in the field? And I imagine lots of people are thinking, what is this all about? Well, you're going to start to get, let me frame it up a little bit in a new way, because it will be progressive in nature. Your learning will be progressive in nature. So take, for example, if you learned how to drive a car, or if you had thought about learning how to drive a car, the way that you went about that was likely to start with a driver's education course. You learned about the rules of the road in that course. You got familiar with maybe how it operates. And you might have practiced in a simulator or even with a video game, and you were probably more observant of how other people were driving when you were the passenger. However, you were not yet skilled at driving that car. To develop your driving skills, you needed to get behind the wheel and apply what you read about, learned, and simulated or observed. The experience of getting out onto the road and actually driving in a progressive, more challenging situations is how you actually learn to drive. And this is what social work education is about. It's the opportunity to take what you learned in the classroom and put it into real life learning environment and practice and apply what you've learned in an educational and supportive setting. Like in driver's education, what you'll quickly discover is that your classes will not be able to fully prepare you for everything that you will encounter in field. Please remember that. This is why the integrative learning, self-reflection, critical thinking, and supervision are so important to this experience. So classes and field education go together. Your field experiences should be influenced by what you are learning in the classroom, but also what you want to take to your field experiences and back to the classroom so that you can self-reflect and critically think and integrate your learning to best prepare yourself for what you will encounter as a social worker. In field, you'll practice skills and behaviors that will help facilitate you becoming a competent beginning level social worker. The Council on Social Work Education, and we usually just call it CSWE, is our accrediting body, and it has identified the professional competencies you must practice and develop before graduating from our program. You will learn more about these core competencies once you begin the program, and all of our field placements will give you the opportunity to practice and develop the transferable social work skills. And there's a link there on the slide that you'll be able to see once you have the slides, and it'll take you right to what those core competencies are. Field is also a place where you'll need to learn and practice how to navigate ethical concerns that commonly arise in all settings where social workers find themselves. And you'll need to do this according to the Social Work Code of Ethics. You'll learn more about our professional code of ethics throughout the program. However, I will say if you're interested in some summertime reading, I might suggest that you spend some time with the NASW, ABSW, and the International Social Work Code of Ethics. It's a suggestion just to take a look at them and start to get thinking about it. We'll be talking about each one of those with you throughout your time in the program. And it's the standards that we all follow in our practice every day. So it's important to know that field is a class and that there will be several people involved in teaching this class over the time that you are in the program. And so on the slide, you can see the MSW student and the field faculty, your field instructors, and maybe even a task supervisor. First is a social work field faculty. This person is the faculty instructor. Just if you imagined your field placement as a classroom, right? This is the official instructor of record. And they will stay with you through your field courses. And we work within the School of Social Work in the Office of Field Education. Come and see us. We're up on the second floor. This individual acts as your liaison between the school and the field site. And they will be there to guide you every step of the way throughout your field experience. We are on your team and we want to help you make this the best experience that we can. They'll monitor your learning and they'll also be the one to assign your grades in field. Again, there'll be the instructor of record on your transcript. Your field faculty is dedicated to helping you develop those fundamental skills and competencies of the social work profession. So please take every opportunity to connect with them and tap into their knowledge and expertise. And more importantly, if you need support, please don't hesitate to reach out. We really are experts in field education and we want to help you be successful. The second person you'll be dealing with is your field instructor. This person is typically, but not always, an employee of the field site. Your field instructor will typically be the licensed MSW who is volunteering their time to provide you with regular supervision and mentoring, and will work with you and the School of Social Work field faculty to establish your learning goals and competency-based assignments and activities during each semester you're in field. Your field faculty and field instructor will meet with you at least once each semester to review your learning progress. We call this the site visit. Most often, this is an in-person meeting, and also we do them very much by Zoom, and will last approximately an hour. It's really a conversation for us to understand more about what you're doing in field. In addition, your field instructor will also complete an end-of-term evaluation of your learning and performance that will be submitted to the field faculty and serve as a component of your final field grade for that term. Remember, ultimately, it's the field faculty at the school who makes a determination of your grade that you receive. Finally, depending on the field site that you're in, you will be also assigned to a task supervisor. You may also be assigned to a task supervisor who provides a day-to-day oversight of your learning. Typically, the task supervisor is not a licensed social worker and may even be someone who's from another professional discipline, but is very familiar with the work of the site. One example is the law school clinics. We have social work students placed there, and oftentimes you're connected to the lawyer as a task supervisor, and then there's an LMSW supervisor outside of the organization. The task supervisor will provide the day-to-day insight, and they're typically not licensed. But they'll have regular field or contact with you, and also your field instructor and your field faculty to help you think about your learning goals and responsibilities. So with that, one of the questions you might be asking is, well, so where am I going to go? Where is this field placement going to be? First, I want to mention the impact of COVID-19. The majority of our field placements are in person or in hybrid form, some in person and some virtual experiences. There are some fully remote opportunities, but they are very rare and certainly should not be expected. For students living in Southeastern Michigan area, many of our existing field placements are located in the Ann Arbor area, but also we have many locations throughout Southeastern Michigan and Northern Ohio. On average, many of our field sites are about a 30 to 60-minute commute from the School of Social Work in Ann Arbor. We also have local field placements in Lansing and the Flint area. For students who are in our online program who live out of state or in different regions of Michigan, we'll work with you to find a field placement in that local area. For full-time on-campus students, we also offer national and international placements. Those are for GASP scholars only, and those options that occur during the spring-summer term. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation if you're interested. If you think about that 30 to 60-minute distance from the school, one question you could be asking is related to transportation and how you'll get there. It's important to know that transportation to field is a responsibility of the student, but we recognize this can be a challenge. If you have access to a car or other transportation, you should expect to use it. We understand that some of you may not drive or may not have access to a car, and that is okay. However, it may limit your potential field placement options. For example, if you're interested in field placements in Detroit or Flint, you'll need to have to get a way to get there. So be sure to indicate if you don't have a car in your field application so that we can be aware as we consider appropriate field placement options that will fit for you. One of the things to keep in mind if you're not from Michigan is that public transportation in our state is frankly very limited. And again, we know this is less than ideal, but we want you to be prepared as you enter the program so that you can plan accordingly. It's also important to recognize that entering a field placement means you are entering a new and unfamiliar community. Learning about the culture, the norms, and purpose and rules of this new community will be part of your early learning and requires time, attention, and intention. Your field sites understand that you will be there to learn, but they're also committed to their mission and the provision of services to their clients and communities. Although you'll be coming into field as a learner, your field sites will have expectations that you are able to meet their standards. Our School of Social Work is fully committed to supporting the education of students as they prepare to enter the social work profession. Given the ethical responsibilities of the profession of social work to promote and protect the well-being of clients and communities that we serve, our school has developed technical standards for students that not only apply and focus on academic performance, but also emphasize the abilities and attributes essential to our profession. You are all asked at admission to review and acknowledge that you are able to satisfy these technical standards with or without reasonable accommodation. If you don't remember whether you clicked the box or whether you looked at these closely, I would highly encourage you to go back and take a look. These standards apply in the classroom, in field placements, in our school, and in our university, and in the broader community and societal context. So please be familiar with them. All right, so time commitment. So over the course of the time in our program, it's important for you to understand kind of what you will be expected to do. So if you're an advanced standing student, you'll be spending a minimum of 684 hours in field. If you're a master track student, 16-month, 20-month, you'll spend 912 hours in field over the course of the program. And that's a lot of time. So we want to make sure that you're mindful of this as you start to plan your schedule and think about classes, your work, family life, and other activities that you have going on. I have a couple pieces of advice I'd like to share with you before I pass it over to Stacy and Amy to talk more about the placement process specifically. And they really are what you see on the screen. So think about owning your own learning and managing your expectations. What do I mean by that? I encourage you to think about what you're hoping to learn and talking to your field instructors at the site or even in the interview about how your learning, your ideas for learning will match the activities at the site. To be successful, you'll need to be open-minded, adaptable, flexible, and patient, and actively seek out opportunities for your growth and development. The more you put into your field and placement, even if it's different than what you expected, the more you will get out of it. And we hear this over and over and over again. 2, it's important for you to learn to function and navigate in discomfort, anxiety, and ambiguity in the classroom and in field. Dealing with difficult conversations and circumstances is the nature of our profession. You will have lots of difficult conversations. Get ready to get really good at that skill. As a social worker, it's important for you to prepare yourself for experiencing a range of emotions, frustration, and anxiety, and it's normal and necessary. It's a critical aspect of being a professional social worker to develop the skills and abilities to function effectively in your social work role, even when your emotions are elevated. Learning how to lean into that discomfort and uncertainty using supervision and asking help for others when needed are essential skills that you must develop throughout your social work career. 3, I think it's really important to be willing to take risks. You won't know how to do most of the things we're asking you to do in field right off the bat. A phrase like, one phrase that we like to use is perfect is the enemy of possible. Your best learning will occur when you are willing to try new things and understand that you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect, and expecting yourself to be perfect will only create unnecessary frustration and can actually lead to burnout. Social work is a field of gray where every situation is unique. Your professors, field instructors, and field faculty won't be able to provide you a script to follow, but rather you'll need to be able to use critical thinking in the moment and integrate your learning and previous experiences to be optimally effective in your role as a social worker. Please understand this takes time and practice. So even if you are uncertain of exactly what you want to do, we encourage you not to hang back, but to rather say yes to all these new opportunities and challenges. My 4th piece of advice is to be patient with all you have to learn. And to be frank, there's no way for us to teach you everything that you need to know about social work in 12 or 16 months. Our expectation is that when you graduate, you're going to be an excellent beginning social worker. Even when you become a fully licensed social worker and can practice independently, you'll still benefit from mentoring and consulting with others. In fact, that's what our Code of Ethics tells us to do. Remember, this is a lifelong learning profession. Everything you do every day for the rest of your career will be something that will inform the thing you do next. It is expected that learning in the field will progress over time, and what you will learn in your first term will be different than what you learn in your final term. However, the pace is different for everyone and every student, and in every field placement, they're set up differently. So be mindful not to compare yourself and experiences with what your colleagues might be doing. Every situation is a little bit different, and you need to be prepared for that, just like working with people. Be patient with this process, and we encourage you to have an open dialogue with your field instruction team to understand the pace and the approaches that best fit your learning and the needs of the site, the clients, and the communities that you're serving. And finally, I think it's important for you to want, seek, and use feedback. I suspect that all of you would say that you'd want our faculty and your field instructors to give you feedback if they had concerns about what you were doing. Yet, we know that when we receive these kinds of feedback, it doesn't always feel good, but don't shy away from it. In fact, you should ask for feedback often and be thankful when you get it, and always be willing to self-reflect and use the feedback to enhance your learning and the development of your social work skills. Explore early in your relationship with your field instructor and field faculty how you can best receive feedback And I would also encourage you to discuss with them the best ways for you to provide feedback to them, especially if you have concerns. Avoiding conversations or using what we refer to as the hint and hope method, which is when you hint that there's a problem and hope we pick it up, is not productive and doesn't fit with the expectations of the profession of social work. So I hope this is helpful to you. And with that, I'm going to pass the torch along to Stacy and Amy, and they're going to walk you through the details of the field placement process.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Stacy Peterson, a member of the field education team, and I'm excited to have you on board. Before we get started, we have this question that we wanted you to think about. This is a question that we say is a question to ponder. The question is, does interest lead to opportunity, or does opportunity lead to interest? Think amongst yourselves for just a hot second. Okay, in the interest of time. Actually, the answer is they're both likely true. What we can tell you is that the majority of social workers have had career paths that haven't been perfectly mapped out and weren't totally planned. And sometimes having an experience, having an opportunity has led to interest and growth in a particular area. So a lot of people come to school and they say, I know exactly what I want to do. And maybe that option isn't available, but you do something a little bit different because it's available, and then you really like it. So we want you to think about, it's okay to know your interests, but don't let your interests limit you in opportunity. Seek out and be prepared to take advantages of opportunities and know that sometimes your interests will follow. Next slide. So what I'm going to talk about today is how do you apply to field? And Amy is going to join me and we're going to talk about the placement process. Next slide. So first, what we want you to know is that we will be holding spring summer field faculty office hours for folks that are applying for field for fall 2023. So what that means is starting May 1st, which is Monday, we will have field faculty available to answer questions. We have a Zoom link here. You can find it on the webpage, and there will be team members available to answer your questions at these times every week through all of May and the early part of June. Next. So the big question, when do you apply for field education? The field application for people starting field in fall 2023, September, opens Monday, May 1st. What that means is the application will be available to you. We will have, there's a process that you walk through. There are opportunities for you to look at agencies that are available in your pathway. You may submit your application. We don't have a specific due date for that application. However, so May 1st it opens, starting May 8th, any applications we have received, we will begin the placing process. So I'm going to say again, it opens on May 1st. We start placing on May 8th. You may submit your application anytime after that, but your choices will change based on when you submit your application. For students who are starting field in winter 2024, that's January, your field application is due Thursday, September 21st. Next slide, please. So, I think, sorry, I gotta get my notes right. Here are reasons why you might apply for field at different times. As we said early on, we have multiple opportunities. We have national placements. We have dual degree students. We have students who are participating in our global placement programs. And then we have individual placement needs. So sometimes you might be a 16-month doing a national placement in spring summer and you need to apply for field early. If you're in a national scholar program, we have a couple of scholarships They have different field requirements. You may be entering a program with transfer credits and apply at a different time. So those are just some of the nuances. What we want you to do is use those Zoom office hours and check in with us if you have any questions. We want you to know that we are with you on the journey. We're going to accommodate you as best we can, and we want you to know that we're here to help. In the national placement, sometimes other reasons people apply at different times. Say you want to do a school placement and you're a 16-month student. 16-month students do the bulk of their field hours in the summer when schools are closed. So you might reach out and see if you need to change. We also have opportunities, for, like I said, for dual degree students. That might be a student who's getting their master's in social work and maybe another degree in business or law or education, and they might have some scheduling requirements. If you are dual degree, we're going to ask you to also reach out to the Office of Student Services to help you with your plan and course planning. If you're doing a global placement, which is a global independent study, which is not a global field placement. So there's global independent study, global field placement. You're going to talk to the Office of Global Activities for assistance. And we have their email is ssw.oga@umich.edu. And that will also be repeated. You can also find it on our website. I always like to tell people we give you a lot of info at this talk. There's no quiz, there's no test. We're available to answer questions if you have them. Reach out to us. We want to help you and we want to support you in your journey. So as a reminder, if you have any questions about your field placement or the application or due dates, just contact us. You're what we're here for. We always say we want you to reach out to us and connect with us rather than have a bad experience. Next slide, please. So one of the things we want to be really transparent about is that there are limitations in the placing process. So many factors influence how the process unfolds. That's why we call it a dynamic and ongoing process. So each placement agency that we work with has an application process. They have to submit an affiliation agreement. So we were talking about some challenges. Sometimes you want an agency where the field instructor or the agency might not be available. Our field instructors, the people who support you in the field, they are volunteers. They have babies, they get married, they take breaks. We can't control that. Sometimes certain placements have training cycles that are outside of our application deadline, and so we might not be able to take you, or you might need to make a schedule change. Many of our agencies, again, we talked about COVID, we talked about how things have changed. There might be changes in funding. We also have agencies that maybe need a break from working with students or found that this isn't a good time for them to take students. So as I was saying, we vet our agencies, we take them through an approval process. We also have a limited number of certain spots. So a lot of people come into the program and they want to do private practice, but maybe they can only take one student, or maybe that person is on maternity leave and taking a break. Our office, we update our slot listings as frequently as we are able. The other thing we like to let you know is not every agency takes students every placing cycle. So we have a couple of different schedules that we shared with you, and some agencies prefer different cycles. I always remind people that we're doing social work in a host setting, and it's not me being the queen of the world and getting my way. It's responding to what the host is asking of us. Additional things that impact the placing process. You might have a required class, you might not be available on the date and time the agency needs you there. Say you have a Monday class, and that might be when they have court, and if you can't go on Monday, they can't take you. The other things that agencies do is they vet you. We vet them to make sure they meet our standards. They vet you. So they might say, oh, this person expressed interest here. or they say they want to come here because it's Ann Arbor, but they're not really interested in the work we do here. Or we might like a more experienced placement. I'm sorry, a more experienced candidate to apply here. And finally, how you present yourself. You know, what I tell people is, I don't get you a placement, I get you an interview. If you don't show up and interview well, they might say this isn't a good candidate for our program. So we will work with you. We have wonderful support services here, but we want you to know that as much as we want to give you everything that you want, we are bound by what's available. And then there's also the part that you play when you attend your interview. Next slide, please. And Amy's going to join us. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Stacy and Rachel. I'm Amy Van Tyne. I'm one of the other field faculty here in the Office of Field Education, and appreciate all that Stacy and Rachel have shared so far. And what I'm going to be talking about is really the technical parts about how to actually apply for field placement. So first and foremost, we have a website that walks you through the field placement application process. This website can sometimes be a little tough to navigate, but it really covers a lot of information. It starts on the incoming field student webpage, which lists the main steps that you'll need to do as you begin to think about applying for field. This includes composing and submitting your field application. There's information about interviewing and also preparing to start your field placement. So each step links to a page with information that gives a lot of detail about that particular step. The site is really a great resource on the process, but again, as both Stacy and Rachel have said, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. We do love for students to kind of refer to those resources first and hopefully be able to get an answer there, but we don't want you to hesitate to reach out if you need some additional information. So let's focus on the first few steps. And next slide. So in composing and submitting your field application, there are two items that you're going to be uploading with your field placement application. The first is your goal statement and the second is your resume. These are the materials that will be sent to the placement site. Your goal statement is meant to give the field site an idea of what you're interested in and what your current skill level is. From your materials, they will review what skills you'd like to learn, which will help them know if they're the right match for you as a site. You will also share with us your top 3 choices after you've been able to look through our field placement database, that you'll be able to look at what those options are and see what might fit well with your pathway and your interests. The field site will also use your goal statement and resume as a writing sample, so please be really mindful of this as you're completing those things. Check for spelling errors and grammatical errors to correct these things, as these potential field instructors will be considering this as they're making their decisions. In most placements, there is a writing component to what people are doing. In some placements, there's a lot of writing that needs to happen, and others not quite as much. And so just being really mindful that every piece of information that you are providing, someone will be reviewing it for how that will be a good fit with whatever the placement is going to be. You will have the opportunity to review our database of what our current placement openings are. That will include a brief description of the organization or program and what students may expect in that placement. From that database, you will select your top 3 choices. Before the field faculty sends your materials to the organization, we will review what you've submitted to determine fit based on your goal statement and what we know of the placement as well. Generally, we are sending your materials to your top choice first. It may be helpful to note that some placements, and Stacy was saying this a little bit, may have very few student spots. Others may have very few students that select an organization as their top choice. And others may have far more students, such an abundance of students that are interested in, and they don't have the availability. So we may reach out to you as field faculty if after we review your materials, we determine that there may be a better fit that may not have been at the same level of student selection. So in reviewing your materials, if we're seeing that you have a strong interest in a particular area, but it's not one of the things that you've selected as a top choice, we may reach out to you to have a conversation about what other opportunities there may be and to potentially consider a different placement than maybe what you had listed as your top 3. Or we may also reach out to you if we have a particular placement and we've had 15 students identify that as their first choice placement and there's only one spot. We may also reach out to you to discuss what is the likelihood out of 15 to be able to get one spot, and maybe would it be in your best interest to consider some of the other potential opportunities as well. So we may reach out to you about those things. We cannot guarantee that you'll be placed at your top choices, but this, being able to review what your top choices are, does give us a really good starting point to understand what your interests and highest kind of priorities are. If your first choice for a field placement doesn't work out for any reason, maybe they've declined to interview you, maybe when they initially told us that they would have availability, something has changed, like Stacy was saying, and they no longer have a spot available, or maybe you were interviewed but you decide that it's not the right fit or right option for you. Then your materials will be sent to another field placement site after you've had the opportunity, likely to reflect about your interview experience with the field faculty that's been working with you. Because you're applying for a field placement practicum experience rather than an employment position, your goal statement is very important, and it's also different from what most people are familiar with a cover letter. It's important to make your goal statement general, giving an overview of your interests and skills, and not being quite so specific, not addressing it or customizing it to one particular certain field placement that you picked as your first option, because you are looking at other options as well. We also really emphasize that it's important not to include very personal information about your physical health, mental health status, or other personal information that you wouldn't typically include in any kind of professional cover letter that you may be doing. Your resume is like any other professional resume, but should emphasize any social work skills and experiences that you have. And our Office of Career Services is a really great resource to help you with this if you have any questions. We'll talk a little bit more about interviews and decision-making process and how that works a little bit later on. The Career Services Office does prefer to have a couple of weeks to be able to review your materials. So if you're interested in their services and support, please contact them early. You'll want to get on this and get those things submitted to them very soon to be able to get the support that would be beneficial. Next slide. So once you've submitted your field application, we will then be sending you a confirmation email that we have received your field application and that you've been assigned to one of our field faculty for the initial review. These all go to your UMISH email, and we strongly encourage you to be checking your UMISH email very regularly. All of our communication will be going through those emails. If you don't receive this message within a business day, because it's a kind of an automated email response when it's been received, please do make sure that you reach out to us so that we can confirm that we have received your materials. There are 9 field faculty in our office, and combined we have more than 150 years of social work experience from lots of different areas of social work practice. We are all dedicated to helping you find a field placement that best fits for your learning, and we are fully committed to preparing you to join our social work profession. We're actually really excited about it. We really enjoy doing this work. As field faculty, we really do have many different roles within that title, and one of those that we all really appreciate is being a mentor. We really love working with students, and we want to help you like others have helped all of us in our social work journeys over the course of our careers. Your Office of Field Education placing faculty will review your application materials and the placement sites that you selected in that priority. If appropriate, your materials will then be sent to the field instructor for review. You'll be notified when your resume and goal statement is being sent to that field site. Because we're working with a large number of students, this process is not immediate. And as Stacy was saying, the application process, while it opens in May 8th, we are working over many, many weeks in the placing process. So you'll typically hear from field faculty within a few weeks of your application, but we do place students throughout the entire semester. So throughout this entire spring, summer semester, we will be placing students for fall. Some of you may hear from us very quickly, and others may hear from us a few weeks after submitting your application. So as students may be connecting, you may be hearing about different timelines. This is very normal and what we expect, and what we want to help prepare all of you for as well. If the field instructor and the field site would like to interview you, you will be sent an email connecting you with the field instructor for you to reach out to set up the interview. So we do provide all of that contact information for you to be able to kind of take ownership in arranging for the interview. After the interview, the student and the field instructor will be emailing the field faculty to confirm whether they're accepting the placement, if they're the student and they're offered a placement, or if the field placement would be offering the placement to the student. If either the field site or the student determine that the organization is not a match, the student will be notified and their Office of Field Education placing field faculty will pursue new field options. And we will incorporate both the information that we receive from the field site that the student interviewed with, as well as any student feedback. If the agency decides to turn down the student, we'll share any feedback we receive that can be of help in your next interview. We're confident that all students will find a field placement that will meet their pathway area and learning interests and will facilitate competency development. We have never had a situation in which we have not been able to find a placement for a student that would be able to meet those important aspects of their educational plan. If a situation does arise in which a student is turned down after 3 interviews, or if the student rejects the field site after 2 interviews, depending on the circumstances, a student success meeting may be scheduled. This meeting would include a representative from the Office of Field Education placing team, the Assistant Dean for Field Education, the student's faculty advisor, the MSW program director, and the Assistant Dean for Student Services. The purpose of such a meeting would be to identify whatever barriers there are to field success and to be able to develop an action plan. Next slide. One of the questions that we get is, what happens if I don't get an interview or I'm not accepted after I interview? First and foremost, what we want to say is do not panic. We want to encourage you to reach out to your field faculty, as we may have feedback from the field site that can help you as you're moving forward. There may be nothing for you to do differently, and we simply might move you on to the next opportunity. Again, in situations where we have a field placement where there are more students that have identified that is an area of interest and they interview 5 students for 1 or 2 spots, there may be students that would fit into that placement very well if they had more options. And so there may be nothing different than a student would need to do. However, if there is specific feedback on the things that you can do to improve your interview skills or how you're able to articulate your previous experiences, we'll review that with you. It's important for you to be aware that as a cohort, you are not all in the same spot in your skill development. It's possible that your current skill set isn't a match for the work and training provided at a specific field site. In these cases, you may need to reflect on your goals and how you engage with the field instructor during the interview. Again, as Stacy was referring to people who are interested in doing psychotherapy for a particular placement, there's a lot of specific things that many of the organizations and practices that we work with require for students. And so those are things that we can be talking with you about. Psychotherapy may be what you want to do as an example, and that may be your long-range goal. But in an interview, the field instructor may be assessed that your skill development requires that you first improve skills of engagement, assessment, and critical thinking before you're ready for psychotherapy cases. And that in and of itself may be why you weren't selected. So remember to be self-reflective and patient with all that you have to learn. Whatever the reason for not getting the placement, please reach out to us so we can help you learn from the interview and move forward in your development of social work skills and competencies. And I'm going to turn this back over to Stacy.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what happens when you get accepted. So one of the things that we would say once you interview and they accept you is, whoop, hooray, you're accepted, congratulations. But what we want to now do is prepare you to get started. How do you start field? So one of the important things that you have to do is you have to communicate. And I don't think I can say this enough, throughout your whole process here, you need to communicate. If you go on an interview and you like it and they accept you, you need to let us know so that we can do our final matching. But you also need to talk to your field instructor about what are the requirements you need to get started. We've listed an article here. It's called All You're a Joy, and it's great information about how do you get started, what is the mindset, where you want your head to be when you start this journey. But there are other practical things that will need to happen. So many of our sites have health screenings. If you are working in healthcare, that's going to be number one important that you have health screenings and documentation of what they're asking. A lot of our sites do drug testing, and some even do background checks, particularly if you are working with vulnerable populations. And that's mostly with children and older adults. What we like you to know is that the university works very hard to support people. We have a long-standing commitment to assist individuals with criminal conviction histories so you can pursue your MSW. But you have to communicate. I always tell people, give me the opportunity to help you. Do not tie my hands by not communicating and giving me important information. Many of the sites will have you do an HR application. Amy said it, I'll say it again. Use your U of M email, check your U of M email, and I'm going to say put your U of M email address on your resume. I had a couple of people miss placement opportunities this year because they put their private email on, and then when they came to school, they didn't check their private email, and the agency only had one email address, the one from the resume, so they missed opportunities to interview at some of their top spots. Once you are here, once you are ours, your U of M email is king for U of M stuff. Respond to your emails promptly. U of M is a very email-rich community. We get a ton of them, and part of coming here is learning how to manage your email, and you don't want to miss something important. You don't want to miss a request for an interview. You don't want to miss a request for a writing sample for a placement that you want. It's really important to keep up with your U of M email. When you come to campus or right before field starts, we have a welcome week, a seed week. We also have a pre-field orientation online, and we are going to give you the same information. Remember, I said it's not a quiz and you don't have to remember everything. The other thing we want you to know is that field is a class, and as such, it's a class that has a Canvas site, a course site, and it has a syllabus. You want to make sure that you are reading up about what you need to know to be successful. We're going to help you and reach out to you, but I can't help you if you don't participate in the process. So the state of Michigan and other states have set forth exclusionary criteria. Oh, this is about criminal conviction. So it's just talking a little bit about the supports we have. Going back to criminal history background, if you have a conviction in your history, again, make sure to communicate. We have an incoming field website that reminds people of, it has a section on preparing to get started that has a lot of good information about, again, what do you need to know to get started? And reminding you, come to the webinar, email us, we're happy to help. Next slide, please. So, as I said before, I'll say it again, we have given you a lot. We've given you a lot of information that will be useful to you as you begin the field journey. We also want you to know that, again, we're available to answer questions. We have other information, other resources. We have a special integrated health and hospital placement requirement. If you're doing that, you also have to take this required course, and it's offered in the winter semester. If you need disability, if you have a disability and you need support, we work with the Office of Services for Students with Disability. We follow the ADA Act. We have resources for international students, resources for undocumented students. This is a resource page specifically for special cases. The other thing we remind you, a few of our sites may ask for letters of recommendation. We are not allowed to use your letters for admission for those recommendations because the person who submitted that release, that letter signed a release saying, I'll write a letter for recommendation into the program. They did not sign a release for us to give to have permission to send that letter elsewhere. So I can tell you, if you're going to do a school placement, you want to have a letter or have your resources lined up. We talked a little bit about ADA and resources. So in the next slide, we talk about what happens after. So we have, next slide, please. Licensing and career planning. This is some other resources that we have. You know, there's a licensing exam. We have a wonderful resource in our career services that can help you prepare. We have that says, Stephen Covey tells us that we need to begin with the end in mind. So all states have some type of licensure for social work. Ms. Woods at our career services can help you with that. If you are planning, if you know you're going to move outside of Michigan, please know that other states' requirements for your classes, for certain field experiences, they don't match us. We are placed in Michigan. We do a lot of Michigan stuff. If you know that you're going to move to someplace else, let's look at their content and requirements together. Let us know how we can help you. You want to research what's required in your state, and you can utilize the ASWB, that's the Association of Social Work Board. That's the board that gives out the licensing exam. You want to check in with them. Again, Ms. Woods is amazingly supportive. So, deep breath, woosah. We have come to the end of this portion. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and if you have questions, you can start putting them in the chat. We have team members available. In 5 minutes, I'm going to come back on with Professor Sherman, and we're going to talk specifically about what it takes to become a school social worker and what is the school social worker certification process for the state of Michigan. It has been wonderful talking to you. 5-minute break, questions available, and I'll see you on the other side if you're still interested. Hey everybody, we're back. Next slide, please. We are going to start our presentation on about school social work and social work in a school setting. I'm Stacy Peterson. We've talked before. I work in the Office of Field Education, and I'm here, me and my colleague Zaina Busi, we help students who are interested in being placed in a school. Along with me is Associate Clinical Professor Beth Sherman. She specializes in the area of social work practice with children and youth. In addition to teaching, she coordinates the school social worker certification specialization program. Yeah. Thanks, Beth. And we're going to give you a little bit of lay of the land for school social work and what happens when you pursue the specialization and also the placement requirements. Beth?
Hi, everybody. And it's just nice to be joining your this webinar talking about field. So as Stacy said, I coordinate the school social worker specialization. And so what we're going to be talking about today are some of the roles and qualities that go into the profession of being a school social worker, what the requirements are for the school social worker specialization at our school here at the University of Michigan School of Social Work, what the Michigan approval process is, so that once you graduate, you'll, in terms of qualifications to practice as a school social worker. And then, as I heard the team saying earlier, Stacy was talking about like how different states have different requirements. It's the same with school social work. And so talk to you a little bit about how you can figure out if you plan to practice in a state other than Michigan, what you can do to prepare yourself for school social work practice in those other states. And then we'll talk about the school-based placement process and provide you just with some context and additional resources. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one thing that's really interesting that's going on right now is that there is a critical shortage of school social workers in Michigan. And historically, it's been a pretty competitive position to get into, but because of some of the expanding services in terms of school social work and mental health services in schools, that there actually are more positions there. You know, it's quite a it can be a very good career choice just in terms of being able to find work post MSW. So some of the roles and abilities is that school social workers, like many social work positions, but be able to engage with a large variety of constituents, and that can be the students, families, teachers, principals, buildings, and sometimes districts, and also outside resources when you're linking and coordinating. Really strong assessment skills, both of, again, individual students, group interactions, as well as buildings, building climate, the school building climate, to be able to assess that, what the relationships are, what the strengths and needs are. Also, to be able to have strong intervention skills in terms of interacting, again, teachers, students, families, if you're hearing a theme. And also, a really, really important thing in terms of school social work practice is being able to advocate for students, and particularly related to their rights to education. And as we know, the right to education has been historically denied to a lot of different populations of kids. And so being able to advocate for those students to related to those rights is a really important skill set. And also being able to do very specific evaluation practices to see if kids qualify for various services and under the law in terms of their rights. Okay, now it's very important, of course, as a school social, I would say, of course, as a social worker, to be able to form positive relationships and to have a good skill set related to forming those professional and effective relationships. And at the same time, sometimes you might be the only school social worker in the building, or you might have served 3 different schools. And so, one day you're at one school, another day you're at another, and another, and so forth. So one has to be pretty independent. Yeah, just being able to work independently, but also as a member of a team that may not be a social work team. It may be another kind of interprofessional team. The thing that you will often hear from school social workers is that you have to be really organized, but at the same time, you have to be very flexible, because anything you wrote down or, put in your schedule in various ways, anything that you were like planning, invariably, something else is going to happen. So I think ability is to be able to be flexible and pretty go with the flow, and at the same time being able to be organized so that you don't get so off track with some of your specific responsibilities. Efficiency, schools are wildly complex environments and also very fast paced. So I think that a lot of school social workers, can be an initial learning curve, which is completely appropriate, of just sort of what are the competing demands, how to prioritize your time, and the various needs. And I already said the word organized, because being able to be organized and keep track of things is very important, and yet not so wed to having things go a certain way, because they're never going to go that way, because we're dealing with people. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of the thing that's interesting about the school social worker specialization is that it's a very popular specialization at our school. I think there are quite a few reasons for that. One is that it's a relatively easy specialization to get. So if you're either in the interpersonal practice pathway, if you select either the interpersonal practice pathway or the welfare of children and families pathway. So if you select either of those pathways, what you need to do for the school social worker specialization is to just take 2 courses which are counted as electives that you'll need to be taking anyway. And one of them is 626, and that's school social work assessments. That's a 3-credit course. And the other one is 628, which is a 3-credit course, and it's school social worker interventions. We do offer we have for years, and I imagine we will continue to do so, because it's, as I said, it's quite popular. So we do offer them, each of these courses 3 times a year. So no matter what sort of track you're on, you should have an opportunity. They do fill up quickly, but you should at some point in your school social work program have a chance to take these classes if you're interested. The other requirement is that for the specialization is that in addition to the pathway, the 2 classes, and the third thing is to do, you have to have 500 field hours of direct social work practice with children and youth. Those don't have to be 500 additional hours, that just a part of your total field hours, at least 500 of them have to be direct social work practice with children and youth. These hours do not have to be done in a school setting. So just child and youth direct social work practice, 500 hours is what's needed. So if you complete all these requirements, when you earn your MSW, you will also earn your school social worker specialization. You do not have to apply for it. You don't have to fill out any additional paperwork. You just complete the requirements. We do a degree audit, and when you graduate, if you complete these, then you will have earned your school social worker specialization. You will see there's a little asterisk on the bottom, which is that if by chance you aren't in the interpersonal practice or the welfare of children and families pathway, but you do have a field placement where you're doing direct social work practice with children and youth, then please contact me. And there's an exception of being able to build out, like you probably need to take at least one other course focused on children and youth. And that even if you're not in the interpersonal or welfare of children pathway, if we make a special plan, there is a pathway for you to earn the school social worker specialization. Again, as long as you are doing 500 hours of direct social work practice with children and youth. So in terms of the approval process, what Michigan, every state has its own requirements for school social work. And when I first started working in this field, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be better if there was just one national standard and there wasn't all this fussing, between different states and what their standards are. And someone was like, well, you'd have to change the Constitution because education is the state's rights issue, sort of taking us back to our civics and history and government courses. So every state has their own requirements. In Michigan, what Michigan does is it delegates the training of school social workers to approved school social worker training programs. And one of them is us, University of Michigan, and there are also about 9 or 10 others, maybe 9 other universities that also have the approval in Michigan. So we all have an approved program. So once students complete the approved program, which I just outlined in the previous slide, then we issue what's called SSW Form 310. And essentially what that is, it's a recommendation from the person's degree granting institution, which is us, that recommends you to the Michigan Department of Education for temporary approval as a school social worker. And that SSW Form 310 is good for 5 years. So it expires on December 31st of the 5th year. And what you do is once you get employed as a school social worker, then you submit this SSW Form 310 to your employer, and then the school or district, then they apply on your behalf to the Michigan Department of Education for the temporary approval. The state Michigan Department of Education doesn't want to issue all these approvals for people who aren't actually going to be working as school social workers. So you have the recommendation, but you can't really do anything with it until you actually get a school social worker position, and then it's processed through the state. You work for 1 year on temporary approval and have a school social worker supervisor. After that first school year of successful completion as a school social worker, then you get Michigan Department of Education grants full approval, and that stays until for as long as you're practicing as a school social worker, with just a small exception that if you leave the field for more than 5 years, then you have to take some additional coursework in order to come back as a fully approved school social worker. So it's a pretty, I'm not trying to sell it to anybody, but it's a pretty good bang for the buck of taking these 2 classes, and then you have this 5 years of eligibility. The next piece is that other states each have their, I'm sorry, one back slide. Thank you for helping. Other states each have their own requirements. And so if you want to find out what your state requirement is, if you plan not to practice in Michigan after graduation, what you could do, unfortunately, there's no central clearinghouse, again, states' rights issues. But you can go to your state's Department of Education and just look up what the credentialing process is for school social workers. And a lot of them will have way less credentialing than we have. Like they won't even have any specific training. If you're a social worker, that's good enough for them. Some will have more requirements. Like for example, California, you have to do 1,000 hours. So that might have changed recently, but in the past, I'm just sort of throwing things out there. What I'm suggesting that you do is for sure look at your state's website And particularly there's a section that says out-of-state prepared school social workers. And so a lot of other states, if you get the school social worker specialization for here at Michigan, they will recognize that training. So again, if you're considering doing it, you can check out the other state's website and see if it would be beneficial to you to have the credential when you graduate, because they'll recognize it as appropriate training. And again, check the Department of Education website for out-of-state prepared school social workers. But if you get stuck at all, because it can be a bit of a maze, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to help you like sort of cull through and sort out what you might need. And yeah, I think that's my piece in terms of the school social worker specialization.
Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is the placement process for being placed in a school. So we have this graphic here, which talks all of, there are many, many points. We're just going to move around my little clock here. One of the things we want you to start off knowing is that if you're placed in a school, there is a special calendar requirement. School placements run when the public school runs. So public school starts in typically late August to September, and it goes until June. So if you are a student who has advanced standing, that means you come into our program with field experience. You can start your field in September. You would be at your placement from September to June. If you are a 20-month student, you will start your field placement in January. If you're placed in a school, you will be in that first placement from January to June. You will get June off and have a summer break. You will come back in the fall. You will begin in late August, September, and stay until June. Because the school year runs from September to June, your placement will fall in that window. So sometimes if you're graduating in May, we will work with you to support you with the understanding that you are in your placement until the end of the public school year. Okay, that's really important to know. It's important for your learning and your educational experience that you experience a full year in the school so that you are experienced and equipped to go out and enter the field. So we always want to tell people that, because it's really important that you don't make a commitment and then not keep it. It not only harms the people that you're working with, it puts you at a disadvantage. When you're here, if this is the route you will take, we can talk more about it. But the big thing we want you to know is it's January to June for 20 months, September to June for 20 months coming back from break, and for all of our advanced standing students. The other thing about working in a school is because you are working with a vulnerable population, you will be asked to do a background check. You want to ask about it at your interview. Ask them how they want you to do this. Most sites will refer you to their location. One of the questions we get is, oh, I have a background check from where I was before. Can I use that? Typically, they'll say no. You'll have to get a new one for this new part of your journey. And it's important that every county is different, every state is different, so it's really important to do the one that's. I was talking about the background check and sort of letting you know that you can't bring an old one with you. You have to get a new one wherever you're going to be placed at, and they will let you know of their process. From there, we're going to move on to references. I've shared earlier that if you completed your application for programming here, your application to come to the program, you probably used some references or got letters of recommendations. We are not permitted to then take those from your incoming student file and send them someplace else. What you have to do is be prepared to ask a professional colleague, maybe a job, a reference that you had, or a professor that you worked with. Let them know that you may need a letter of recommendation for your placement. Give them a heads up so that they're prepared when you ask for it. The other thing that is really important when you're going to be working in a school is that there are immunization requirements. I always call them petri dishes if you're in a school, but what we say is we call them, we jokingly refer to them as cesspools or places where all the germs are. And if you work in a school, you're going to encounter many, if not all of the germs. So most schools ask for a flu vaccine. They ask for the Hep B vaccine series, and some others will ask for a TB test. And we see more places asking for COVID, proof of COVID vaccine. Again, each district has their own guidelines and requirements. We want you, again, we talked about communication. Ask what they're going to ask of you. Ask what they're going to require if you want at your interview. Does this place require vaccinations? If so, which ones? We have resources here on campus to help you. We have a student health services that can offer the immunizations if you need them. But it is important for you to know that you may be asked for that. Since the schedule is a little different, your registration will be a little different if you're in a school-based placement. What will happen is we will work with you to complete the proper registration. And so one of the things you may have heard that you may or may not remember from early on, you have 912 hours of field if you are 20-month or 16-month or master track. You have 684 hours of field if you're advanced standing. Some sites say you will complete these hours 2 to 3 days a week. Typically, advanced standing students are in field 3 days a week. If you are a 20-month student, you'll have typically two days the first semester, 3 onward. But some people break it up. Some people say, I have 24 hours of field to do. I would rather do 2 8-hour days and 2 4-hour days. You can negotiate your schedule at your field site. We will work with you on the registration requirements to ensure that you are meeting the program standards that we have to meet. So if field typically ends in April and you're in placement until June, what happens with your grade? We work with you. We give you a penalty-free extension that we are already aware of. I also talked about if you're graduating in April, we want to help you graduate on time with the understanding that you're going to finish your placement. You're covered by our liability insurance. Whichever one of the field team that you're working with on your placement, we will guide you through that process. We want you to know, again, you're in placement until June. The other thing we like to say is schools are very selective, and like Dr. Sherman said, there are many opportunities. It's a great growth area, but you need to like kids. One of the other things that happens in the school setting is people say, oh, I need to have a schedule, I need to have plans. I always say if you work in a school, social work, you need to wear roller skates. If you work in a school, you're wearing rocket power roller skates because it is always moving, always going. There's always going something going on. Next slide. So we want you to be able to contact us with additional questions. I'm Stacy Peterson. I'm here in the Office of Field Education. Professor Beth Sherman, her information is here as well. We are happy to answer your questions and to support you on this part of your journey if this is what you're interested in. We look forward to hearing from you. We appreciate your time today, and we want to thank you for joining us. One more slide. You want to talk about this one?
Oh, sure. Just that here is just some information on that you can, if you want to look a little more about the school social worker specialization, you can check that out. And then you don't need the SSW Form 310 form now. That's for when you graduate. But there's a School Social Workers Association of America if you want to learn a little bit more about the profession. We have a Michigan Association of School Social Workers that actually gives membership for free to students. So once you enroll, if you want to join up with that, it's a great opportunity. And last but not least is that we do have a student organization called Social Work in Schools. And they are, it's a student club, student organization, and it's a great opportunity. So it's called SWIS. So be on the lookout for that. And that is for on campus and online students. It's a nice club organization. Thank you. I'm really excited. Welcome to Michigan. I'm really excited to see you and to hopefully be in class with some of you. It's exciting.
Last slide. We have one more slide. It's our big thank you. We want to thank you for your time. We want to remind you of our contact information. If you have additional questions, we are happy to help. We look forward to having you join, not just our school, but we're looking at you as our future colleagues. So we're happy to have you join the profession. We wish you a good day or evening. I hope it's sunny where you are, and welcome to Michigan.